Hi everybody, my name is Alan. On behalf of the crew, I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Bridging Heaven and Earth. You know, it's an interesting thing. We live and we all go through our daily lives. Wherever we are, there's whatever happens in our daily lives. There's the drama, there's the love, there's the compassion, there's the experience of moving through this life and hopefully having as much as we can experience of happiness. And people who've watched the show before know that we talk about the show being dedicated to the oneness being that experience that is what we really are, that is the connection between us all, is that we are all the same love. And really, if you look at it, every religion, at the heart, at the base, at the root of every religion, there is that connection, there is that truth, there is that experience available. And yet, what happens as we proceed through our lives is that we end up seeing the separation more, is that we end up seeing the differences between us. But in all true religions, when they started, it was about the experience of that love. It was about inclusion. It was about that knowing of that experience of love, of the true love that connects us all. And then when we have that experience in every religion, it's about every tenet and every experience is, in a sense, to treat your brother as yourself, to share that love, to feel that love and share that love. And that is what, again, this show is about, is another opportunity for us all to be in that experience of love and then to go out in this world and share the love. And so often, do we walk the walk? Do we really go out in this world and see that connection rather than the separation? And we have people with us tonight whose lives have been dedicated to really manifesting their experience of that love, that they've gone deep into their own being to know that truth, and they made every effort to take it out and to share it and to spread it and to treat their brother as themselves, to really go out there and to heal the sick and to feed the hungry and to clothe the unfortunate. And that is an extraordinary thing in this life, because so much is intellectual, so much is in our heads, so much is not manifest. But it is important that we take that understanding, that experience, and bring it into this world. Tonight we have Bernie Glassman with us. He's a world-renowned Buddhist teacher. He's the founder of the Peacemaker Community. And the Peacemaker Community is set up with people and centers integrating spiritual practice and social action. He's also the founder of the Greystone Mandala, which is a network of community development organizations that run a bakery, that gives people the opportunity to learn skills, and then have set up apartment buildings where they take these apartment buildings that are run down in horrible areas of Yonkers, or at one time were horrible areas in Yonkers, and just transform these buildings into places where you can live and live with dignity and live with love. And he has healthcare services, the Greystone Foundation. And he's the author of 2 books, Instructions to the Cook and Bearing Witness. And his life is dedicated to the recognition of that truth and the sharing of that truth. And really, in his world, it's that love and that joy. And the little I know of Bernie and the little times that we've spent together, what impresses me is with all this resume, what he has is the twinkle in his eye, the joy of being alive, the joy of sharing and collaborating and coming together and letting that love flow. And then we have with us Shelley Flanders, who some of you have seen on the show before, because she did, on the 100th show, she did an interview with me, and she's been involved with the show for quite some time. She's the operating director of the Bridging Heaven and Earth Foundation. She has a long history of spiritual experience, of spiritual awakening, and taking that awakening into that manifestation, into that light, letting that light shine. And she's, going to come on with some of the goals of the foundation to talk. I mean, you've heard us talk a little bit about it before, how we want to get the show on in all the cities, and how all the shows will be on the internet, and just all those kinds of things. Have a retreat and communication center to coordinate with various artists. So, I mean, she's going to talk to us for a little while about that. And then we have an extraordinary video of a wonderful sculptress from the Santa Barbara area, which is where we shoot Francis Jansen. And it's a beautiful video with wonderful music. And again, all of their efforts and all of their consciousness is to feel the love, and share it. And they do it in really extraordinary ways. So again, it's an opportunity for all of us out there and all of us here to really go deeper, to really let that love take us over and move through it into our lives on a breath-by-breath, day-by-day basis. So please, as we normally do at this time, to set the tone for this show, join me in a short meditation. If you don't know meditation, just relax. Let whatever happened to you today, just be here with us now, and let this show take us all to a new level, a deeper and more committed level to that truth and that manifestation of truth. So please join me in a short meditation, and then we're going to have Shelley and Bernie and a beautiful video. So please join me. Thank you. So we're going to be joined on the set with Shelley. Hi, Shelley.
Hi.
Good to see you here. So, what does the foundation mean to you? What would you like to see, and what is your intention with your participation in it?
Well, the mission statement of the foundation is that it is a nonprofit 501c3 organization that is formed to perpetuate global unity through the education of the oneness of all life.
That is a mouthful. So, and what are the specifics? How do you see, the show and the foundation and all the efforts that, so many people make all over the country? How do you see that coalescing into, what you want to happen?
Well, basically the foundation has different goals. The first series of goals that we look at for it is, the immediate goals are to perpetuate the television show, Bridging Heaven and Earth, because basically you've been providing support for this show for the last 5 years, and the foundation can expand on that. And we would like to get on in more cities around the country. And what we can...
Well, now we're on in about 40 cities, is that about right?
Yeah.
So there is still some big cities that we're not in.
There's still major cities, there's still lots of areas that we could reach. And basically, the way we've been reaching them now is through volunteers in the local areas who can be intermediaries between us and the public access system, because that's how we go on all over the country right now, since we produce in public access. So we're looking to be more pronounced with the foundation, so that people can know that we exist, so that we can find people who are interested in helping us around the country. Also, we're looking to raise funds, obviously, so that we could, in places where we don't have public access, go on lease access, which is approximately $250 per episode. So if you want to go on once a week, you're looking at about $1,000 a month on lease access.
And we also want more of an internet presence, is that?
And an internet presence would be ideal, especially in the future when the bandwidth is going to be much better than it is now. Right now we have about 17 shows through spiritweb.org, and you can watch them live, full shows, 17 full shows in SpiritWeb, which is also expensive. But it's been being hosted by Renee Mueller at SpiritWeb, so we haven't had to pay for that. It would be nice to have all 120 shows on live for anyone and anywhere in the world to just watch at any time they choose, and that would be the ideal. And then the next development of the foundation would be to actually create a communication and retreat center. That's my vision, my heart's vision for the foundation. And the first stage of that would be to develop our own television studio, where we would not have the constraints of public access. We could produce in a way where we could keep the set up, where we would have more of a chance to have musicians, where we don't have to break down each time in the morning and set up again in the evening. And we would also be able to go on in different cities and different countries because we don't have the constraints that public access provides. And We would be able to also help to have the global communication aspect of it would be that we could also have publishing, a marketing facility, we could have radio, we could have we could have recording studio. We could also provide a lot of facility for other people who want to produce their own television show, who want to do radio. We could provide a facility more than just producing Bridging Heaven and Earth. We could produce other vital television that would hopefully expand into changing what we know as television today, from negative information to more positive information. I also look at the Foundation and the Global Communication Center as being just that, a nucleus of information of all of the people around the world and all of the organizations globally who are working in their own way to create a difference. And I know Bernie does that as well. He has something of a dementia aspect of his foundation. And that's what he does, is to coordinate all of the people and have a database and a reference and a center that would coordinate all these people around the world who are working to make a difference, so that we could organize and put people together, put organizations together to help them further the cause of what they're doing. Because they might not know that someone in Australia is also trying to do the same thing, or someone in Europe, or, and put these people together, link them together so that we could really make a vital difference in that way.
And I know that your background is in art and things like that, and you want to try to bring that into the... That's the other thing we're trying to do, and that's really the way that I envision gaining support financially for the foundation is through the world of art. That's my pet love, and I've grown up around art, so it's comfortable for me. I spent some time in New York meeting at Peter Max's studio. We have an original Peter Max that's been donated. We have also received lots of other art that's been donated, and we plan to have a fundraiser in December with a silent auction, a luncheon. But also, to take it further, I visualize for us a retail Bridging Heaven and Earth art gallery, and that could provide a space for all of the artists who are interested in supplying art. We could provide a commission to them, to the authors who come on who want to provide their books, to craftspeople, to people who design clothing. All of the arts in any way could be taken into the gallery and used to support the artists, but also to support the foundation. And we really all these things would just be to support that, the statement that you initially made, to spread the love.
Nothing is for personal gain, absolutely nothing. Nothing can be for personal gain. It has to all be for the benefit of the whole, of the one. Mm-hmm. That's the only way the future will change.
Okay. And I think what we're planning to do is every 3 or 4 shows just give people an update on, what we're doing and how the foundation's going. So maybe what we'll do now, I just want to thank Shelley for coming, just giving, just a little bit, and she, we plan on her doing like a segment every 3 or 4 or 5 shows, just telling, the updates with the foundation. So now what we're going to have is a beautiful video. It's the Francis Jansen video. It's called Memory of Stone, and the music and the video by Bent and Maggie Migan of the Win-Win Productions. Francis is an extraordinary sculptress whose work just goes out all over the world to spread that forgiveness, to spread that love, to spread that compassion. And that's, again, what her life is about. So the video is really beautiful, and then when we come back, Bernie will be with us. So.
There's a single word I must tell you. If If there's a single thought I must teach, if there's an infinite body of wisdom, open your heart and let me reach. We're here, it's now, we're all together, you're never alone. We're here, it's now, we're all together, I am around you. Touch me and you touch my brother, hold me, you caress yourself. Feel me cause I have no other, you can heal me, can't you tell? We're here, it's now, we're all together, you're never alone. We're here, it's now, we're all together, I am around you. We're here, it's now, we're all together, you're never alone. We're here, it's now, we're all together, I am around you. Know me that I live inside you, nothing more is separate here. Speak the word and I abide you, I will whisper in your ear. We're here, it's now, we're all together, you're never alone. We're here, it's now, we're all together, I am around you. We're here, it's now, we're all together, you're never alone. We're here, it's now, we're all together, I am you. Know me that you always find me, everywhere you go from here. I will hold you deep inside me, you and I are meant to be. We're here, it's now, we're all together, you're never alone. We're here, it's now, we're all together, I am around you. We're here, it's now, we're all together, you're never alone. Now we're all together, I am you.
Hi, well, we're on the set with Bernie, but before we start talking to Bernie, I'd like to say that Frances is going to be a guest on the show at some point in the future. We just haven't worked out the right date, so that's going to be real exciting. Her art is just extraordinary. So welcome, Bernie.
Oh, thank you.
So when did you have the experience that basically changed your life and made you, you know, the experience I was talking about at the beginning where you knew that there was a oneness?
Yeah, actually a number of times in my life. The first time was that I would call a deep experience of that nature. I was already practicing Zen for maybe 8 years.
Wow.
And this was back in 1968, where I had the experience of oneness of life to a depth where I knew that's what I wanted to do in my life. But then maybe 3-4 years later, I had an experience which I guess was responsible for the rest of my life until now.
Until this very moment.
Yeah, and maybe even for the next moment. But right. It was one in which I felt the hungers or the unsatisfactions of millions and millions of what I call hungry spirits, which I realized were nothing but part of me, to a place where I made a vow to try to feed all of those aspects, which meant that I had to move out of working just in the world of Zen and into the world. And that's what I've been doing for the last 30 years.
When you say moving out of the world of Zen, what do you mean?
Trying to work in every sphere of activity. So for me, the world of Zen was really, was and is a spiritual world. It meant working in the world of business, in the world of social action, in the world of communication, of art, and seeing all of those worlds as being the spiritual world. Not just what we think of as religions or beautiful paths, but to see every aspect of life as
because you're there and you're alive, it might as well be, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And how could it be otherwise, in essence, too?
Yeah, I guess for me, what I mean by spiritual then is to get beyond the separations, and that's not so easy. So we talk a lot about it. There are a lot of philosophies, as you said in your introductions, that one can talk about the oneness of life and the beauty of life and the love of life, but when you go outside, I tend to. I've been doing a lot of work in the streets with the homeless, and people with AIDS, and one of the things that I see so often is that we may talk about all the beauties of life and the love of life and the oneness of life, and one of the ways we can do that is by denying or avoiding those aspects of life which we don't want to see, and then we don't have to deal with it.
Right.
And then we don't have to deal with it. But you know, for me, the oneness of life is the easy metaphor to look at is my own body. So I can look at my body as being oneness of life, and in fact, if I look at it, if I don't go around talking, it's a little bit of an illness to go around saying to everybody, "Hey, look, this is one body," but I act like it's one body.
Right.
So if this hand gets cut and starts bleeding, this hand can't deny what's happening there, can't run away. It automatically doesn't think about, hey, this is part of me and I got to do something about it. It doesn't think that way. It just takes care. But imagine the illness that would be there if this hand and this hand thought they were separate from this body and separate from each other. I think that's a way a lot of us function. That is, religions don't necessarily operate as if it's one body. They may talk about it, but they're constantly fighting. And look what happens if the fingers can't work together. How do we get the food if each finger is trying to say, I want to give the food because I'll be holier if I give the food, or it doesn't work.
We even go as far as holy wars. We don't even worry about who gets the food. You know, we even do better than that.
There's a UN statistic that says about 75% of wars are based on religious.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah.
It's a really beautiful experience of God.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a song on CD that I think has been on the show. Isn't there enough God to go around? And it's amazing that the experience is that there isn't somehow, or that there's a right way to experience God and a right way to honor and all the different lineages. And so, how do you take? You're out of a lineage, you're out of a tradition.
Right.
How do you take that tradition and make it out of tradition?
The Buddhism. I'm a Zen Buddhist teacher. Buddhism means to awaken. To awaken to what? It's to awaken to the oneness of life. If that's the experience you have, then how do you differentiate one tradition from another? They're like the different fingers of the hand. And they're all there for reasons. And our work is, how do we work together as religions? How do we honor the differences? That is, the hands and the feet have to be different, and they have different functions. But how do we honor those and learn how to work together? So the tradition I'm from is all about that oneness of life. And after experiencing that oneness of life, the tradition I'm from is, how do you find expedient means, we call it upayas, to allow us to fall into the fact of the oneness of life and to work together.
To realize it and to live
so
it.
It's, there's no contradiction in the tradition of Zen Buddhism of working in all these different religions.
Is there anything, just once we identify with a certain thing, it's almost like there's in opposition to others? I mean, so to come to where there's no concept about it is not an easy thing when there's such a long history of a certain...
Sure, it's all our conditioning is there. I mean, you could be, you can get to some kind of realization that cigarette smoking is bad. But if you've been smoking cigarettes for 30, 40 years, it doesn't mean just because you have the realization you're going to stop. There's all that conditioning, there's that habitual energy. But as you have that realization, all of a sudden, the next time you take a cigarette, something hits you and you start smoking.
The light has
less.
been shown on the darkness a little bit.
Yeah.
So what tools do you use to bring all those, and I know you go to Israel and you meet with the Palestinians and the Israelis, and your plan is to go all over the world and to meet with, you're like going to meet with every warring faction you get your hands on, which can keep you quite busy, as I understand it.
We're quite busy, yeah.
Right. So, and when you come there, I mean, besides bringing that joy and that love and that knowing of the oneness and knowing that we're the same hand, do you have specific tools? I mean, meditation. How do you deal with the fact of this tremendous momentum of separation, of anger, of division?
Yeah. There are three basic tenets of the Peacemaker Community, and I think there are three major tools. The first is to come to a situation or a place or to wake up, come from the standpoint of not knowing. That's deep listening, deep openness, not being attached to any of the things you've learned or experienced. It doesn't mean not to have a huge bag of tools, to know many languages, to have many tools, but to not be attached to those tools. So that's our first tenet, not knowing. There are techniques for improving your ability to come out of that space of not knowing, out of that space of non-attachment to all your knowledge. The second of our tenets is to bear witness. That means to enter into that arena, let's say it's a Palestinian town, village, or an Israeli settlement, or a homeless shelter, or the streets where homeless kids are. I've gone underground in Manhattan to where people live in tunnels. At one time there was 5,000 people living in tunnels under the city. To go into those areas and to stay, not to just go and be a voyeur, or to go and peek and run, but to stay and learn from the situation. Because I don't go as a teacher, I go to learn. Out of that arises the love that you talk about. And that's our third tenet, loving actions, healing actions. That is to do something based out of that experience. That first entering with a deep openness, second staying there. We do a retreat at Auschwitz where we bring people from many countries, many traditions, children of people who ran concentration camps, SS folks, survivors, children of survivors, gypsies that were killed there. We bring all the people together and we don't just go and look. We stay there and listen to the stories and listen to the stories. We bear witness until out of that comes the loving actions that you're talking about. That's our tools. And we're doing this in Europe, in Asia, in South America, in Middle East, and in this country.
And you were one of the first people, I remember reading about you a long time ago, about the thing you did in Yonkers with, what is the Greystone?
Greystone,
Mandala.
we call it Greystone Mandala. Mandala, circle of life.
Right. Where you started with a bakery that, you know, employs literally hundreds of people. Right?
Greystone employs at this point about 175 people, but it's in various aspects. The bakery itself is about 75. These were folks that had, some of them had been homeless, but almost all of them had been unemployed for a long time, unless you count drug selling as a means of employment. We had some wonderful entrepreneurs that became managers and supervisors.
They had entrepreneurial experience.
Tremendous. And made a lot more money doing that than baking, but their life was a little bit less stable.
The cops were right around them.
Yeah, and you know, you make your money, and what do you do with it? You put it in a mattress, and you could be killed because you made the money. So it's a little different lifestyle. But Greystone is it was my first attempt of trying to work with a whole community, a whole segment of life. So it was creating jobs, childcare, housing, working with drugs, working with addiction, working with dysfunctional families, working with functional families, working with AIDS, all of those aspects. And we built health center. You mentioned earlier that we renovated buildings in bad shape. I mean, that's quite an overstatement. The buildings that we got, the first building, first time I walked into it, had about 4 feet of rubble on the ground floor. There was nothing that could be saved except the brick.
I usually don't underestimate.
Dead animals we found when we walked in.
Wow.
Everything was, it was complete.
It wasn't luxurious
rehab.
by any.
No. And there was during a time when there were people speculating and buying those abandoned buildings, thinking they were going to gentrify.
Right.
We were gentrifying all over the place.
Right.
And so we had to pay $250,000 for that shell.
Really? The shell with the rats, rubble with...
More than rats, more than rats.
Really?
No roof.
Wow.
Second building we bought, the roof was in the basement. So we bought buildings of that nature, total gut rehabs, and created housing. But in an area, Yonkers had the highest homeless rate in the country. It is in a county called Westchester County, one of the wealthiest counties in the country. There had been no apartment construction of any type, affordable or non-affordable. There had been no apartment construction in 10 years when I went there. And most of the homeless were homeless because there was just no housing. So we bought these abandoned buildings and completely renovated them, brought people that had been homeless out of the realm of homelessness into
some sort of empowerment,
and not shelters, but this was permanent housing. Mm-hmm. And to show that, for me, the phenomenal way our mind works. When I got a planning permit to do the first building, and it was originally going to be what's called transitional housing, and I decided I don't want to do transitional housing. I want to do permanent housing. And the planning board looked at me and they said, "How can you do permanent housing for homeless people?"
Well, they won't be homeless if they got permanent housing. Let's get a grip here.
But they couldn't grasp that, because homelessness was looked at as a disease.
Right.
If you were homeless, you were going to be homeless the rest of your life like a leper.
Right.
And that's still true. That's still true to this day. People will look at homeless people and look at them like they're looking at lepers. And still true with AIDS and most of this world. So those are arenas that we go into work, because...
And these are just really prototypes, because, I mean, somebody could say, well, you know, you're housing 100 people or 500 people. There's still zillions and zillions and zillions who aren't. So, but really what you're trying to do, and expanding out, we talked the other day, to bring this prototype into, just spread it, and just spread that love and spread that
sure.
understanding you have and the ability to deal with housing boards and all that stuff.
Yeah. I moved from the work in Yonkers in Westchester into working on a global sense and working with groups like the groups in Yonkers, like the Greystones. There's hundreds, thousands of them around. And one of the issues is learning from each other. One of the issues is having peer support. There is a lot of loneliness out there for people doing this kind of work. So we're creating ways for us to share and dance and song and love and enjoy, but to share with each other. And most of the sharing that people want is just to be listened to be able to tell the stories and to hear each other. But we also network so that we can learn from each other and to leverage what we're doing.
Yeah, 1 and 1 is 11 rather than 2, and if you start that momentum going, I think it's just a question of really getting the momentum going. Because people would rather be happy, they'd rather feel connected than feel separate. It's just that we've had so much history and so much momentum of that separation, of the differences, of all the things that seem to keep us apart.
I don't believe in utopias. So this is the work that has to be done. If you're, once you realize the oneness of your body, a cancer arises, your hand starts bleeding, you get hungry, you just take care of it naturally. When I say I don't believe in utopias, I don't think that the cancers will stop arising. I don't think that I'll stop getting hungry. I don't think that my clothes will stop getting dirty, or that things will stop and I'll never get cut or gashed again. But if you're in the state of oneness, how can you not, if you're hungry, look for some food to eat? How could you not, if you're in that state, start worrying? If you hear you got cancer, you got to say, what do I do about it? How can you just avoid it or deny it or walk away from it? How can you walk away from yourself? It's impossible. And if you do, because you're somehow sick, you're going to die. So if I see somebody in the streets and I walk away, I know I'm going to die. Because that's me I'm walking away from. But I don't think there won't be people in the streets.
Well, there won't be people in the streets you won't walk by in Cleveland and in Johannesburg, and I mean that's right.
This is just the way this is the functioning of life. It's the functioning of us as a human. We're human. We've got cells, and things are going to happen. And illnesses are going to come up, and stuff's going to come up. And because of that, we have to take care of it to the best we can.
So the foundation now, the community is just trying to do it on a more global scale, and
Peacemaker Community has its international hub based here in Santa Barbara, but there are groups around the world in many countries and staff now in many countries in many regions of the world, and we're working together in all kinds of areas, in Ireland, in Poland, in Israel, in Palestine, all over, and we're helping the realization and the functioning of the one body of life.
And also, when people become involved with the Peacemaker Community, aren't there a series of that you spoke about the 3 tenets, but aren't there a series of commitments that people make in terms of trying to align themselves with that oneness of life, that oneness of body?
It's rather simple. If you're to become part of the Peacemaker Community, we ask that you maintain these 3 tenets, that you approach things from the state of openness, and that you bear witness to what's going on, and then you act on what you're doing. Those are the spiritual aspects. The Peacemaker Community is a spiritually based organization of social action and peacemaking. And the social action and peacemaking side is 4 commitments that we ask you to take on, which were agreed upon at the World Parliament of Religions by about 200 representatives of religions. They worked for a long time. What can we agree on? And they came to 4.
We like having lunch at the right time. That was 1.
The first was nonviolence. They're basically out of the 10 Commandments. The first was nonviolence. The second was a solidarity or economic justice. and the third was tolerance, and the fourth, which is somewhat surprising that these religions could agree on, was partnership between male and female.
That's interesting, because a lot of religions don't really have that as their core
Not
value.
really. So there was this agreement, and we're starting with those, and then we work with those, because partnership doesn't have to be between male and female, as far as we're concerned. It could be between male and male, or it doesn't have to be between human and human. It could be between human and animal. So we're taking partnership as one of the, those are the 4 commitments, and those 3 tenets. That's all we ask. We have another little technique that if you do, the whole world will be saved, and that is we ask you at noon local time to spend 1 minute of silence for peace. And if the world did that, I think we'd be silent for 1 minute.
No, it would change.
I think so.
It would change a lot of things. Actually, I used to say that if we recognized for 1 minute or 1 breath that we're hurtling through space on a ball, you know, get us above our the petty drama
the
of this
picture
life.
of the Earth from space has changed so many people.
Right. I mean, it's just
the realization of us as one cell of this huge, and what we're doing to our own home.
We're cutting off the branch we're sitting on, it is said. So when you talk about there being the spiritual center of the whole thing, and in your world, it's the world of, or the tool of Buddhism. So do people become involved with it, start doing meditation, start doing the chanting, or whatever as a general rule, so those 3 tenets become real to them as more than an idea?
Yeah, but they come real in different ways. So the Peacemaker Community is interfaith and global. I also myself have practiced in Vedanta. I've practiced as a Sufi. I've studied in Trappist monasteries. My main practice and what I can teach is Zen Buddhism, but there's a council of elders of in Jewish tradition, Islamic traditions, Christian traditions, Hindu traditions. So there are many practices for those tenets to be able to practice those tenets, or to realize those tenets. What I can teach is meditation and Zen techniques. And one of the, in Zen we have a method of study which is called koan study, in which we give you something to try to bring your brain to a place where it can't rationally go on and will realize the state of not knowing. I've added to those koan studies things that I call plunges, where I will take you and plunge you into an environment which your brain can't comprehend, until where you could realize that state of not knowing. The streets. I for 10 years now, I've been taking people to live with me in the streets, in the Bowery, and then other places. I mean,
actually living on a grate, or living in an apartment in the Bowery?
No, living.
How far do you go, Bernie? Come on, work with me.
Yeah, it's grates can be dangerous. I
suspect. I was wondering.
But to sleep in the streets.
Actually sleep in the streets.
Yeah. We about 10 years ago, as I said, I started to do that, and almost every year. Last year, Ellen Burstyn, who's a member of the Peacemaker Community, actually came on the streets with us, and she's writing about her experience. It's going to be out in a magazine, that's why I can mention it. It'll be coming out soon. But take them, and then one of the first things I did when we moved to Santa Barbara, people wanted to get me involved in homelessness here in Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara does have homelessness. When I first started to work in the homeless area in Yonkers, 1987, I remember a few years after I started to work, reading about trash cans that were poisoned in the city of Santa Barbara, and a homeless person died.
You mean actually somebody did that for that reason?
Yes. It was the only time I heard of that in this country, and it happened here in beautiful Santa Barbara, because of course we want it to be very beautiful.
Right.
And so when I moved here, people came and asked if I would get involved in some of the homeless issues here, and I am. But to get the sense of it myself, my wife and I put on our street clothes and walked into the streets of Santa Barbara to talk to the folks who live there, to see it from their perspective, to learn from them. And that's our techniques. Bearing witness means I'm not going to come here and just work in some arena without understanding it from the standpoint of the people involved in it. So we call those plunges. Our retreat at Auschwitz, that's a plunge. To spend 5 days in the selection site, which we do every year, and to feel the souls that are still there, the millions of souls, and to hear the stories from all of the various sides. Auschwitz was a place where somebody, Mr. Hitler, decided that the best way of getting rid of the differences of life was to kill them. We all come up with our schemes of how to deal with the differences. Sometimes it's to shut our eyes. Sometimes it's to zone them out of our areas. Sometimes it's to put them in jails. Sometimes it's to beat them up. Sometimes to kill them. And sometimes to learn how to learn from them. So we go to Auschwitz to learn from the differences. And I bring all those differences. We call it a plunge, and we're working on plunges of that type in this country around issues of Native Americans, around the issues of the African Americans, in Europe around the issue of the burning of the women healers. Over a couple of centuries, the number ranges anywhere from 2 to 6 million women that were killed that way, burnt at the stake. Those are issues that are very similar to healing issues. Why do we want to get rid of the healers? And why do we have such a problem with, why did we have such a problem with natural medicine versus the AMA type medicine? You know, all those issues. We'll take people and plunge them into the situation to where they could feel it. And that's one of the
Let me ask you something.
Zen
When
techniques.
you find that these people with seemingly are starting out with disparate views or opposing views, seemingly, when they finish with a plunge, is there some bridging of that gap, you would say, as a general rule?
Yes, I would, and that's
And
why.
does it change their lives when they go back into their communities, that they really take that understanding back? Or?
Yeah, that's why I continue it. My first plunge, this going into the streets, was my first plunge of that nature, and that was, say, 10 years ago. It was after I had been doing retreats for maybe 20 years, all kinds of the different kinds of retreats, and on that first plunge with me was a man named Peter Matheson, who's a famous author. He's my first Dharma successor as a Zen teacher. He's a Zen teacher now, but he'd been all over the world, and he's written many wonderful books, and he'd also done many, many retreats. For both of us, that plunge was a transformation.
For both of you?
For both of us. And on that first retreat, there were about 20 people with us. I'd say about 80% had a major transformation. I went on that first retreat only not knowing if I would ever continue to do that. But it was such a powerful
Was it your
thing.
idea, or was it a conglomeration of ideas?
It was my idea. Well, it was just one of those things. When I graduated from college, my undergraduate school was in Brooklyn. Went to an engineering school. I graduated, and I was sitting with a friend in a pizza shop in Brooklyn. And if you haven't been to a pizza shop in Brooklyn, you got to go, and you've been.
I have certainly been to pizza shops in Brooklyn.
So we're sitting in a pizza shop, and he said to me, "Bernie, what are you going to do with your life?" And I said, "Well, there's 3 things I want to do. I want to live in a Zen monastery."
Really? Even then you knew that?
Yeah, this was in 1960. I said, I want to live in a Zen monastery. I started to read about Zen in 1958. I said, I want to live on a kibbutz in Israel, and I want to live in the streets of the Bowery.
Really? Isn't that amazing?
I did the first 2 pretty soon. I went to Israel and lived in a kibbutz in 1962.
Wow.
I worked as an engineer starting in 1960, and I kept quitting and then rehiring, and I was in the space industry. I started with a Zen teacher pretty early in life, and then visited Japan and with monasteries. I lived in a monastery in this country for many years. Then when I started to do my homeless work, which was around 1986, I realized that there was this third third thing that I said I was going to do back in '60 in a pizza shop, and I hadn't done it yet. And I said, I'm going to start doing homeless work. I said this in 1960. There must have been a reason.
Wow.
So I did my first street retreat.
Wow, that's an amazing story. So I know you're going to clown school now. That wasn't number 4. I mean, so
no,
I mean, how does that fit in, like with the keeping the joy, keeping the?
Well,
I mean, to me, it's a very neat thing because
it's got to do a little.
You're talking about serious things, obviously, on that level. Here we go. Here
What
we
it-
go.
what-
You got it now. You got it.
Yeah, it's
You
not-
know, you didn't wear that the first trip to the Bowery. Right?
No.
That would have been a little
But-
too brazen.
for the last 3 years, it's never. I've always
Never
had
been
one.
away.
Yeah, I can give you some. One of the organizations that's part of our Peacemaker Community is called Clowns Without Borders. They work in refugee camps. I'm training under the guy who coordinates Clowns Without Borders. And so recently I apprenticed with him in refugee camps in Chiapas. He works in Kosovo, in
And is
Africa.
there any like apprentice program you have to go like a number of sessions before you get a red
Yeah.
nose, or you
Yeah,
get
we
the red
teach.
nose right away?
I actually teach, we do together a workshop called Clowning Your Zen. And the first step of learning, after you learned a little bit, you can be what I call a schlepper. A schlepper is the guy who carries the suitcases behind when we're going to do our work. If you practice more and get to a little better knowledge of the game, you can be what I call a disturber. So you're out there in the audience and you make disturbances.
Right. Creating havoc.
If you keep working, you can become an apprentice. And we do training in nonviolent communication. We do training in counsel work. We do training in meditation, in Gandhi type, because we do work and want to bring people into all these kind of arenas. And we do training in clowning. It's a plunge to do that kind of work. Clowning for me is extremely important. It's in the Native American tradition. The coyote is a contrary. In the old courts, the jester, those were important roles. Germans called them.
No, we have a tendency to take ourselves too seriously, and even if we're doing serious work. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
the way I define it is that all of us create our clubs, whether it's a government, a society, a television show, a religion. We create our club by creating the rules. And what the rules are is who doesn't belong. Those people that don't belong, we call the yucky piles. My son, when he was a young
Right.
kid, he put all the food he didn't like aside. Those are the yucky piles. Then when he finished
Right.
eating, he'd figure out what to do with the yucky piles.
Yeah,
So-
inclusion's not part of a lot of
So in our
types of-
society, we've created things to handle yucky piles. Prisons, that's one of the things we create to handle our
drugs.
yucky piles.
a lot of drugs we use.
Beating up,
Right.
oh, yeah, all kinds of things.
Right.
The jester, the clown, knows that the world is one, and that the yucky piles are a part
Fool
of
on
it.
the hill, right?
So he has to work in the cracks of society. He has to work with the yucky piles and with the institutions that were created to deal with those yucky piles.
Yeah, well,
That's-
I think we've come to the end of another show, so I know it really goes fast, and I just want to thank Shelley for coming and talking about the foundation, and she'll be back again, and Bernie and the beautiful video, and it's an opportunity for us all to take all that, really the passion and love that Bernie has shared and Shelley has shared in the video of those magnificent sculptures, and to just take that and feel the love and share the love. And we know whatever we've done today, whatever we think our history is, whatever we think our life's about, we know in our heart that that is the truth of it, that we want to be happy, that in essence we want everybody to be happy. And that's the way it is. So if you want any information about Bernie, 805-687-2053, the same for the foundation. Francis is coming on later. We love you. Good night. God bless you. Thanks for coming. Good night.